Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Griffin Report podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Della Penna, here for episode 4, our second coach of this series. It's also our other head soccer coach here on campus. He took over in February and is the 15th coach in program history for the men's soccer program. Michael Tanke, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so we were talking before, this is a good chance for you to kind of tell a little bit of your backstory, how you got here, but also where this program is going, because I do think it's at a very interesting point with you being a new head coach. So here in year one, what have you seen some of the positive takeaways with this year's squad that you can build off for years to come now?
Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. We're improving on some of the key statistical areas that we look at. We look at ball recoveries in the opponent's half, passes, entries into the opponent's 18-yard box. There's a stat called passes per defensive action, PPDA. It's like how often you're disrupting the opponent. In all those stats, almost every game we've improved on last year. So it's kind of a finicky sport, soccer, sometimes with the score line not really telling the story. And when you're in it, you know, if you're young, it's maybe tough to see that at times, you know, even if the stats are right in front of you. So we're moving in the right direction, and we're focusing on what we can do to improve every day.
I think that's just an interesting dynamic in all sports right now, the use of analytics. And something that I see when I go up there in the hoist room and we're setting our cameras up is that, what is that green thing that you have up there that's filming practice, or is that taking data? How has, you know, your performance as a coach and you coming in here, how has your use of analytics kind of changed the program and what you're trying to do? Yeah,
it's just helpful to know what's really happening. It takes some of the guesswork and the feelings and the emotions out of it when you have facts and data, so that helps big time. And yeah, that green thing's just the camera, so we film every practice. And again, that's helpful because probably for every practice we have, I'm probably watching it back at least once. So for every practice, you know, say practice is 90 minutes, it probably took 90 minutes to prepare for the session, and then the session's 90 minutes, and then most cases I'm probably watching it back for another 90 minutes. Right. It's amazing how much you miss when you're in charge of the practice, when you're running the practice. You're so focused on going from one thing to the next and coaching and informing and correcting that you don't actually get to watch the players and who's performing well, who's not. So. Right. We watch everything back.
Yeah. So we'll get more into this program and your role here currently, but we got to get into some background. So you grew up in Michigan, obviously excelled in soccer. Were you a multi-sport athlete, or were you just, you know, soccer all day?
I played other sports. I grew up in Niles, Michigan, which is 3 miles north of South Bend, Indiana. Cool. My whole family's from Indiana. So basketball is king in that part of the Big Ten, you know. Seems like a lot of the other schools are football heavy, but in Indiana, you know, basketball is king. So I played basketball as a kid. Was never very good at it. I think I'm like 5'7", so the writing was on the wall. I played baseball too. I played baseball right up through the 9th grade, second base.
There you go.
Couldn't really hit it, but I got on base all the time because I just drew walks. Small strike zone, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Strike zone, small strike zone. So, but soccer was pretty much it from the beginning.
Yeah, and you excelled. You played at club, and then you go to the University of Rhode Island, play there for 4 years, 2-year starter, and played in like 65 games. So you had a really good career there. But I read that your head coach, John O'Donnell, his first year was your freshman year, going into it. Did you write him a letter specifically saying, like, hey, I'm really interested in the program, I want to come here? Because I read that, I wanted to see if that was true.
Yeah, O'Connor.
O'Connor.
OC. So when I was maybe 10th, 11th grade, Niles is a small town, so there's not much soccer going on. I didn't really know, too much outside of Niles. But I wrote every single Division I program a letter. There's like 200. I wrote 200 letters. I didn't know what I was doing, and that was back like before you could like email coaches and stuff. You'd send like VHS tapes. I think I sent VHS tapes, and so OC was the University of Chicago head coach, which is D3 in the UAA, good school, and he knew of me because that's more of a local. Niles is like an hour and a half outside of Chicago. Okay. So he had kind of known me, and then when he went to Rhode Island, the letter I think was already there from a previous coach, Gotcha. But I think OC might have thought I was actually interested in Rhode Island. He didn't know that I had written a letter to every single school. I probably wrote a letter to Canisius too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting because you see now like the dynamic has changed with recruiting, and we'll get into like your recruiting styles and how you did that at club. But when you were at Rhode Island, those teams were in a similar spot that you are here, right? Like a newer head coach, you're playing there, you're trying to build a program up. When you were a player, how was that dynamic like for you in comparison to how it is now for you as a head coach, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's completely different.
Right.
I mean, when I was a player, I don't think I thought about really anything other than what other 19-year-olds are thinking about. So I was just trying to score or, get more playing time or win or, the focus is, completely on yourself as a player and trying to get better. And there's a team aspect to that. I wasn't entirely selfish. Right. But yeah, you're selfish when you're a player. You're not really thinking of the big picture or of the program or I was 17 when I started that first preseason. Yeah. I'm an August birthday, so right. I was 17 when I started preseason. So there wasn't a lot of deep thought going on probably in my head. So as a coach, you're thinking of everything. Right. So
interesting. So you graduate in 2011 there. Then you wanted to go pro. You get that call with Rochester in your final semester to go pro for the Rochester Rhinos. What was that feeling like for you to make a lifelong dream come true?
Yeah, it was. That was cool for me. That was like the whole goal was to go pro. It was kind of a weird time because I had credits left. I had spring credits left to graduate. Mm-hmm. There was an MLS club that invited me into preseason, but I kind of knew like I was gonna get cut after like the first month, and then to leave in January, February. Right. And I probably wouldn't have graduated, and then just got cut. It was in Arizona preseason for that club, and I figured, come March 1st, then I'd get cut, and then what? And then the Rhinos coach, Bob Lilly, he's at Pittsburgh now. He was great. He allowed me to drive back. I was in Rochester, and I would drive back to Rhode Island once a week, and miss practice once a week, which at the pro level,
unheard of.
They don't really let you do that.
Right.
They're paying you to be at practice, not to not be at practice.
Right.
But Bob let me drive back. So I'd get out of Tuesday practice, drive to Rhode Island 6 hours, get in the evening, and then all day Wednesday I'd go to all my professors, all my classes, make up all my exams, and then I'd get in the car Wednesday at 4 or 5 p.m. after I did all that and get back to Rhode Island. Wow. Or get back to Rochester.
Right.
So Bob let me kind of, that whole thing was, I was lucky to have had found a team that wanted to sign me, a coach that would allow that to happen. Mm-hmm. So I was able to graduate and play, and it was great. I met Natalie, my wife now, so I've been in Western New York ever since. So.
Right. Yeah, so that was your first taste of Western New York. You played there for 3 years. As a fellow Western New York guy, I've played at that field multiple times for football growing up. you know, that time for you after your third year, you had to retire due to injury. Was that part of that field? Because I grew up playing on that field. I hated playing on that field. Their turf was like concrete. Did that play a part in your injuries? Or
no, I had a freak injury. You could ask maybe Andy Smith about it, because he'll know. It's a acute compartment syndrome in my quad, so it's in my left quad here. But I don't know how to describe it on camera, but I almost lost my leg. So I've got about a 13 or 14 inch incision here on my quad.
Wow.
If you really want to, you can Google
Might have to.
quadricep fasciotomy, but make sure you're not like queasy, because
Right.
you don't want to look at it if it's not your thing. But it's yeah, it had nothing to do with the field. I got a Charlie horse to the quad, and it just kind of was the worst Charlie horse imaginable.
Yeah.
So 2 surgeries, 8 days in the hospital. They saved the leg, no amputation. So
Wow,
it was like,
I'm glad.
it was
That's
a wild
yeah.
injury.
So when you wanted to make that change into coaching, was that something when you were in college maybe you knew you wanted to make that transition after you were done, or was it during your time in Rochester that, okay, whenever I'm done playing, I would like to switch over and be a coach?
Sure. So I mentioned Niles briefly, how close it is to South Bend. So I grew up going to all the Notre Dame soccer games, especially when I got my driver's license. I was at like every game.
That's cool.
And it was like 10 minutes from home, but I didn't have to ask anybody to drive me there anymore, you know. But the head coach there was a guy named Bobby Clark, and OC, the Rhode Island head coach, used to be Bobby Clark's assistant when he was at Dartmouth.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of like, just by sheer dumb luck, I fell into this Bobby Clark kind of coaching tree, if you will. I mean, I wasn't even a part of the coaching tree, but I was just a local kid that wanted to play, and I ended up playing for OC. So I remember being 15, 16 years old after having met Bobby Clark and talked to him, and his son Jamie's the head coach at Washington, and OC, and kind of just, I knew at 15, 16 I was going to be a coach. That's all I wanted to do. So playing was sort of just delaying the inevitable and trying to enjoy that as much as I could. But I was always going to end up coaching, I thought.
Yeah. So then you get your first true experience as a GA at Castleton University in Vermont. GA there, a really good team. When did you realize throughout that whole experience that, okay, this is right for me? Like you started to kind of feel it out, and this is where I'm supposed to be.
So I was in the hospital with the leg thing, and OC, the Rhode Island head coach, he was now hired as the head coach at Castleton.
Gotcha.
So I played for him at Rhode Island, and he called me up and said, do you want to be a graduate assistant and get your master's and coach at Castleton? And he didn't even know. I don't think he knew I was even in the hospital. I think he was just cold calling me, and I was sitting in my hospital bed. I said, "Yeah, I think this is a good idea."
Yeah, right.
So that's kind of how I got to Castleton, and then I was fortunate from there because of my relationship with him. You know, I was 24, and he was letting me coach the team. You know, practice sessions, film, a lot of the stuff that you get to, in most cases, you have to work up to do. You know, you start just doing the laundry or making pizza orders for the team or stuff like from right away, because I had worked with OC, I'd played for him. Like, he knew maybe our ideas were in line, and he just let me run with it. So I was coaching a soccer team at 24, 20. Whatever it was, 23, 24, 25.
Impressive.
Which not a lot of, it's not the experience of most GAs, put it that way.
For sure. And that opened doors for you to then go to the University of Dayton, coach, part of a really good coaching staff there. You went to the NCAA tournament after winning the A10. We're in the second round, one of the best offenses in the country. What was that experience like for you in being a part of the Dayton Flyers? Yeah,
it was a lot of fun. Winning championships and NCAA tournament runs and stuff like that. It's just fun. That's kind of the whole point of all this is to enjoy it. So it's a lot of fun. I would say my time at Dayton was helpful. You know, before then I was coaching because I loved it, you know, coaching because that's what I wanted to do. And then, you know, my time with Coach Curry at Dayton was big for my development as a leader, or, you know, kind of coaching for a profession, so to speak, and growing up a little bit. So my time at Dayton was massive, and, you know, I still follow them. I get on ESPN Plus or ESPN3 and I watch. If it's not a MAC opponent, I'm either watching, you know, Rhode Island, Dayton, or DePaul, which my friends at DePaul. So those are the Rhode Island, Dayton, DePaul, if not an opponent of ours.
That's cool.
So
nice. And then after that, you come back to Western New York. A lot of people don't know that you actually spent time with Niagara and UB in their programs as assistants. During both of those stops here in Western New York, would you have ever thought that your first head coaching experience would be at another Western New York school at Canisius?
Well, yeah, sort of. I mean, I would have, because I was trying to make a living in Western New York at the time. So, like, I would have coached at just about any school in Western New York. You know, the whole UB thing, I was there for 3 weeks, and then they cut men's soccer.
Program,
So I was homeless because I had told my landlord in Dayton that I was leaving already. So we had left Dayton, but we hadn't found a place in Buffalo. I was here for 3 weeks, and then they cut the soccer program. So I didn't have a place to live. We moved all of our stuff into a storage unit. I didn't have a job. I actually coached the St. John Fisher women's soccer program as a volunteer assistant coach. I think they paid me like $1,000 or something to be an assistant. Wow. So it was a kind of very odd time. What would have been, 2017, 2018. That was just an odd time. So yeah, I coached at UB for 3 weeks. I coached at Niagara for maybe 10, 11 months, and then got a little bit more settled with a kind of a full-time job, if you will. So. And
that was at the club scene with Empire United. Yep. I've always found like the club scene very fascinating. So can you describe to the listeners what your title was there and what some of your day-to-day operations were with Empire United? Because they're huge in Western New York in terms of, you know, their reach, but also how many teams they have and what you were doing with that program.
Sure. So yeah, at that time I kind of hooked on to the academy. Geez. What was Empire is now called RNY.
Yep.
So the first team, what was the Rhinos, we talked about the Rhinos, they're now rebranded as RNYFC.
Gotcha.
And Empire Academy is now the RNYFC Youth Academy. So just so anybody listening can kind of follow along with all this,
go with it, right?
All this terminology and titles. But so at the RNY Academy, it used to be Empire Buffalo, Empire Rochester, and Empire Syracuse. And so, you know, each city had its club under the Empire umbrella.
Gotcha.
But then the best players from each city play for the academy, the boys' academy. What was once called the DA, the Development Academy, run by U.S. Soccer. I don't know if this is boring.
No, I think it's
now
interesting.
It's now called MLS Next.
Yep.
So it's run by the MLS. So it's the same thing. But all the best players from Buffalo Empire, Rochester Empire, Syracuse Empire, they would kind of, and this is a bad term, but, you know, an all-star team, if you will.
Yeah, like a super team.
And
together.
So the boys were almost entirely 33% Buffalo, 33% Rochester, 33% Syracuse. Not by design, but, you know, trying to find the best players. It's almost an even split. And the cities are similar populations.
Right.
So for the last, 5 years, I was a head coach of an academy team. It's really not much different than what I'm doing now. You know, you have to get hotels and buses for the away trips and feed the kids for away trips. You have to obviously run practices and have a plan and process for how you're gonna coach and how you're gonna install a style or a system of play, but you're doing some fundraising, you're doing an alumni game, you're individual player meetings, so a lot of the time spent is really the same,
Right.
Probably the biggest difference is the age of the players and then just the hours of the day.
Yeah,
I would
'cause
probably
it's later too.
I would
right?
probably get into the office around noon to 2-ish, kind of after lunch,
Right.
and then leave at 10 p.m. So now it's almost the opposite. I'm getting in at 8 in the morning and
Right.
leaving at in the afternoon. So just the hours and the age of the players are the only differences, but it's not as different as maybe it would seem. From the outside. Yeah.
Another thing that you did in the last 5 years was you were a scout for 2 years with the Philadelphia Union Youth Academy team. Is that a similar dynamic to like an MLB scout? So like you have your area and then you're trying to, promote kids to try to funnel them into the program. How does that work?
Yeah, a little bit. My role for Philly was a small one at best. So just so we're not like, painting the wrong picture. But no, I mean, they had at the time, they had 2 full-time scouts. So, and this is for the academy.
Right.
It's a little different than the first team, the professional MLS team, but obviously it's the same organization.
Right.
But for the academy, they had 2 full-time scouts. And in addition to those, I think they only had, 2 other kind of part-time scouts, which was, I was one of those. So it's really a small group. The 2 guys that are full-time, that's all they do for a living, is watch, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds play soccer.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And they're flying to California for a week, fly to Michigan for a week. And they're doing a lot of the legwork. They're doing a lot of the, that's their job. And I was coaching in the academy for Empire at the time. So my full-time job was clearly focused on that. But yeah, probably a match a day I was watching. So maybe 5 matches a week. 40 weeks, I don't know what's the math there.
A lot of soccer.
I was watching a lot of games, and sometimes they'd give me a game to watch, and it would be kind of completely blind. Just they're trying to tick a box off of, we haven't seen these 2 teams play, so let's have Tanke watch and see anything. If there's anything interesting, sometimes it would be very, very particular. This boy here, he's born in November. He's from this club. We've seen him play 10 times. He's coming in on a visit next week. We want you to watch him because we want another set of eyes. What do you see? What are we missing here? So it was a little bit of everything. I was more of just helping out, consulting but I was watching probably about a game a week for them, and we would have scouting staff Zooms probably once a week to follow up on all the players we're tracking. So
that's cool.
A lot of soccer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. On top of what you're doing at the academy. So you have these 2 great jobs. What was so interesting and why you wanted to get back into college when you saw the opening here at Canisius? Why did you want to get back from, again, the club scene, which you were really excelling at, but back into the college ranks?
A little bit of everything. I'd say, part of it is I wanted to have my own project. I think in everything I was doing, maybe a critic could say I wasn't really leading. I wasn't in a leadership role, or I wasn't really, I didn't have my own project. I didn't have my own way. I couldn't do everything the way I wanted to. So a little bit of that, just that's an area where I could get better, was having to make the decisions, So there's a little bit of growth there for me. Part of it was just purely practical and family, and I had mentioned I was getting home at 10 p.m., 10:30 p.m. I don't know how sustainable that was for me. Part of it was the fact that I just really love college soccer. I think the way that the game's going in our country is an exciting way. It's the level is getting better and better. The coaching and the professionalism in the youth game is getting better and better. You see now like players getting sold at 18, 19, 20 years old from MLS to Europe for 8, 10, 12, 20 million, you know, and Ricardo Pepi's was 20 million. And you see the game is just moving in this incredible way towards the European way. And I think college soccer gets kind of like scuffed at a little bit, like like almost people eye roll, college soccer, like if you know, the best way is the academy way and to go pro. Of course, you know, if you can go pro, go pro. But I think college soccer is so special. You know, when I was a kid growing up, that's all that you know was really
was, right?
You know, so I would go to the IU games, the Notre Dame games, the IU Notre Dame games, which were massive and crazy, and you know it's a you know, under the lights, kind of more local, more grassroots, almost like a European way where you go to the third division side because that's your neighborhood team. That's kind of the niche that college soccer fits into in our country. And it's just cool. I just think it's really cool to you know, you're as a player, you're living with players your age. Doesn't happen in the pro game. You're going to school. Doesn't happen in the pro game. And I know there's turnover because the seniors graduate and the freshmen come in, but you're with the same guys for 4 years, which doesn't happen in the program. It's just such a unique culture. There's no other place in the world where you can live, you know, residentially with your teammates and get the school piece done at a university level and play at what would be kind of like maybe like a third or fourth or fifth tier pro level, you know, what another. It's just such a cool culture. So when Canisius opened up, Natalie and I had never had any interest in leaving Western New York, you know, for Philadelphia, for example, or
somewhere else.
Going back to Dayton. We're always going to stay here. And Canisius opens up, and you're just like, well, this is perfect in a lot of aspects. So.
That's cool. So I have a quote from our director of athletics, Bill Maher, when he was in the search process. So he said, throughout the search process, Michael stood out as a coach who has great communication skills, the drive, and the enthusiasm to recruit and develop the young men in our program. He also illustrated a clear plan on how he wants to build Canisius into a program that can compete for MAC championships. Explain to me where you were and what you were doing when you found out the news that you were getting your first head coaching job here at Canisius.
Yeah, I was walking my dog. It was snow, you know, it was February. We were at the park, Natalie and I with the dog, Jenny dog. And it was kind of like any other job in any other industry, I'm sure. You interview and then you wait. And that's like the worst part. And then, you know, they tell you, I hope I'm not throwing, you know, Bill under the bus, but they tell you, oh, we'll get back to you by Friday or, you know, whatever the deadline is. And then the deadline comes and goes. And so you're only thinking, well,
the worst.
You know, it's not, they called the other guy or whatever. So I think it was a Saturday, and we were walking Jenny dog when he called. So Natalie was pumped. Jenny just was, you know, started running, you know, zoomies around. She didn't know what she was excited about, the dog, but she knew we were excited. So yeah, that was it.
That's cool. So, and then it was a quick turnaround for you because you come here to Canisius, you were using your recruiting tools to your advantage and trying to bring some guys into this program that, you know, were your guys. Like, that's not really a dynamic most of the time for a first-year head coach. So what was that like for you? It had to be really chaotic throughout those, you know, formative months in your first few weeks here at Canisius to get that done. When
I got hired, the previous coaching staff had 0 incoming verbal commitments or signed NLIs, which sounds like a bad thing maybe at first. You're like, oh man, but it was a great thing because it allowed me to start from year 1 and not having to start from year 2, so you know, so to speak. And what a lot of people don't realize or wouldn't know otherwise if you didn't know, but it was the best year ever in the history of college athletics
Right.
to get a coaching job a little late because of COVID and because of the recruiting kind of backlog, if you will.
Yeah,
so,
that makes sense.
So some of these guys that are in our freshman class, all of them, Joey and Tarek and KP and Svitz and Eli, Daniel and Josh, all of them. In another year, I feel fully confident saying by February 3rd, they would have been committed somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So I would have been in a really tough situation.
Right.
Whereas this year, just by circumstance, we were able to get a really great recruiting class in year one. So
I found that so impressive at the time too, because I was taking a lot of those guys on visits around campus and bringing them around and stuff. So for you to get that done, I think that speaks volumes for you. But I feel like your program.
Who did you tour? Do you remember?
I know Tarek was my first one. I remember that because that was the first time I met you.
So we've got to get you back.
I guess so. Maybe I'm the glue. I should be getting paid or something on the side for you. But nevertheless,
we'll look into that.
Yeah, we should. I feel like your program right now is in a very similar spot, even though you weren't here, to last year's women's soccer team because, again, newer coach, regime, he's starting to bring in his own players, and maybe the record wasn't exactly where he wanted it to be, but you could see that the foundation was being built. Do you feel that way, that, even though, okay, right now wins and losses might not be where I want it to be, but, again, for longevity purposes, it's going in the right direction?
Sure, I feel that way. The correct response is that we're building something, but the players here now don't want to hear that. So we still have 8 games left, and we're gonna do our best to make sure that those 8 games count for something, and that we're playing for something come that 8th game. So I'm hesitant to say, oh, we're young, or this is a learning year, it's a rebuilding. Nobody wants to hear that who's involved in the program.
Right.
So, yeah, that's probably all true. And yet it's my job to look beyond these 8 games, but it's also my job to just look for Siena. We play Siena tomorrow, and that's it. And then that's as far as we look.
Right.
So sure, maybe, but I don't really care to think too much about next year. We're still trying to win games this year.
Focus on now. And I've always liked that about you, because I remember over the summer in one of our first interactions, and we were talking about in our season preview expectations for this year, and I feel like a lot of coaches would do what you just did. Yeah, maybe think long term or have the correct response, but you were completely honest and transparent. You said, they're unknown. We don't know what this year is going to bring. Why have you taken that approach instead of what a lot of other coaches would rather do, maybe sugarcoat it a little bit? Instead, you're just upfront with it. I feel like that's a way that you've kind of embraced, and it's been working well for you because, the players most certainly enjoy it, that you're going to, keep it how it is and not try to sugarcoat things.
I don't know, unless somebody knows something I don't know any coach that knows how the season's gonna go.
Right.
So I think it's an odd. I know people like yourself have to ask questions like that, but what am I supposed to say?
Right.
I think this is gonna be a good year, or I think this is gonna be a bad year. That we haven't played a game yet.
Right.
So I just think it's so odd to make predictions. The guys on TV that sit at the desk can do that, but I don't know how many head coaches are, actually, I think Coach K, we're going to go 12-5 this year, and in losing the Big East final. I think that you never heard Coach K.
Right.
So I think I genuinely don't know how the season was going to go, or I didn't know how the season was going to go, and I would say probably the same thing next August and the same thing next August. It's really up to how events play out, and personalities, and a little bit of luck maybe, and a lot of work on the back end. So.
And I feel like in these last 8 games, like you just mentioned, a lot of the things early on in the season were out of your control, and some of things that just you weren't getting the right bounces, things not going your way. In these last 8 games, what are you looking for as a coach to maybe build off? What are the big keys that in this conference slate that you really want to accomplish in terms of, maybe, like you said, getting the wins and losses and focusing on the now, but again, just trying to formulate for maybe the long term as well?
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about 2 things, and it's really important to do them both simultaneously, because one or the other doesn't get you very far, but it's just playing our way. We have a defined idea for every moment in the game, whether it's a build-up, a mid-block, crossing and finishing. We have details that we talk about in all phases of the game, and we have our way of doing it. So we have to stick to the plan and the principles of play that we're talking about and we're working on every day. We have to do that. But we have to also run and play really hard. And if you just play our way, it might look a little pretty at times or look nice or something, but like you just fall short because it ultimately, you can't just outthink or outpass an opponent. Like
right.
you just get ran over a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then if you just outrun them and outcompete, like that falls short too, because if 11 guys are running around really hard, very commendable, but it doesn't quite result. So you have to do both. And I think this season we've done this and we've done this, and only in the moments where we've done them at the same time. I would say like first half versus Bonnie's, first half versus the Mount the other day, the whole match against Dartmouth, Stonehill. First half versus Binghamton, the best moments of the season, we've done both at the same time. And when things have not worked, it's when we just rely on effort and forget what we're actually trying to do, right. Or we just think that all of our system will be the superior or something, and we forget that you actually have to work really hard at the same time. Mm-hmm. So when we're doing both, not to say that we win every match, because that's not how it works. But when we're doing both at the same time, we're pretty good.
Yeah, and you've shown the glimmers, like all those halves that you said. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, you guys were, obviously the better team on the field. How hard is it, not just for you as a coach, but also to the players to continue to remind them, if we play our style and, like you just said, take these 2 assets of our game and put them together and do that for the full 90 minutes, that we can, get the result that we want? Because sometimes I feel, like you said, when you're a younger kid, maybe you're not thinking bigger picture, like you mentioned earlier when you were a player. So how hard is that sometimes to remind those guys, like, hey, if we just control what we can control and play our game, that good things are going to happen?
Yeah, maybe this is another answer I'm not supposed to say, but it's true. The more we lose, the harder it gets. Right. You lose a little bit of belief, and you shouldn't, but that's our human nature, is to, maybe I'm thinking, is this really working? Right. And so that's my job to convince, to persuade, to keep showing the stats, to keep showing the film. We said the other day, faith, not religion, but faith is believing in something you can't see, and that's exactly, what's going on right now. You can't see the improvement maybe, or you can't see certainly in the results, the wins and losses, but it's there. And so, if we lose again, it gets harder. And if we lose, so you've got to try your best as a young player to just separate, process from results, and performances from results. And but it's hard. It's hard. That's you've just asked. How hard is it? It's difficult. That's coaching. Yeah.
So last question of the day, I asked Coach Louie this as well. Say I'm a recruit and I'm interested in coming to Canisius. What would be your selling pitch in trying to persuade me to come here and play soccer for the next 4 years?
I'd say, assuming you're a good player, we want you. I'd say come visit. You know, just come visit, because I think A, I'm not very sales pitchy, but B, you know, it's something you got to have to experience for yourself. There's nothing really I can say on a phone or on a Zoom call. But when we identify a prospective student athlete, probably we've watched them 3, 4, 5 times, maybe call the club coach, then maybe set up a phone call or a text. Then after that, set up a Zoom call. And all of that is information sharing. Here's what we are. Here's, you know, here's how maybe much it might cost you if you go here financially. Here's how we play. Here's some film. Watch the game. But the sales pitch part of it is just, when can you come visit? You know, come visit. Come get on campus. Watch a practice. Meet the guys. You know, stay in Frisch Hall. I think once you visit, then you just know this place is for me, or maybe this place isn't for me. But there's no sales pitch.
That's good. You keep it real. That's what I like about you. And thanks for coming on today. I'm really excited to, you know, see the growth over the next few years and to see what you can do with this program, because obviously, like you said before, you can see it, what is going on with this program, and I do believe it's something special. So we'll have to talk again in the future, but again, be on the lookout for the rest of the Canisius men's soccer schedule. You can find it on gogriffs.com. And until next time, signing off, I'm Griffin Della Penna, and as always, go Griffs.
Go Griffs.